Welcome to 10 Minutes a Day, a daily reading of the Catholic Church's social encyclicals. We interrupt the planned progression of the documents to bring you Magnifica Humanitas, the brand new encyclical of Pope Leo XIV on safeguarding the human person in a time of artificial intelligence. In light of what has been said, we can better understand why AI can be a valuable tool, and at the same time, why it calls for a measured and vigilant approach. In recent years, its private use has expanded significantly, prompting growing reflection on both the opportunities it offers and the risks tied to its rapid spread. In personal use, three aspects in particular deserve careful consideration: the ease with which results are obtained, the impression of objectivity, and the simulation of human communication. The speed and simplicity with which information, complex analysis, media content, and practical assistance can be accessed undoubtedly make life easier. Yet they can also encourage excessive reliance in the search for ready-made answers and weaken personal creativity and judgment. The apparent objectivity of the responses and suggestions these systems provide can lead us to overlook the fact that they reflect the cultural assumptions of those who designed and trained them, with all their strengths and limitations. The artificial imitation of positive human communication, words of advice, empathy, friendship, and even love can be engaging and at times genuinely helpful. However, for less discerning users, it can also be misleading, creating the illusion of a relationship with a real personal subject. When words are simulated, they do not build genuine relationships, but only their appearance. The artificial imitation of care or support can become particularly risky when it enters contexts where real relationships and emotional bonds are lacking. Here the danger is not so much that a person may believe they are communicating with another person, but rather they may gradually lose the very desire to form genuine human connections. Broadening our perspective to the use of AI in society, we see that it is now embedded in decision-making processes across many sectors and at multiple levels, in communication, management, and control. The gains in efficiency and the potential to improve certain services are clear, yet rapidly and uncritically adopting them exposes us to a range of risks, including the tendency to overlook the environmental impact. Current AI systems require enormous amounts of energy and water, significantly influencing carbon dioxide emissions, and place heavy demands on natural resources. As their complexity increases, especially in the case of large language models, the need for computing power and storage capacity grows too, which requires an extensive network of machines, cables, data centers, and energy-intensive infrastructure. For this reason, it is essential to develop more sustainable technological solutions that reduce environmental impact and help protect our common home. The use of AI is never purely a technical matter when it enters processes that affect people's lives. It touches on rights, opportunities, status, and freedom. Important and sensitive decisions concerning employment, credit, access to public services, or even a person's reputation risk being fully delegated to automated systems that do not know compassion, mercy, forgiveness, and above all, the hope that people are able to change, and can therefore give rise to new forms of exclusion. There are clearly harmful uses, such as a manipulation of information or violations of privacy. Yet there's also a subtler danger. For when AI systems present themselves as neutral and objective, they end up reflecting and reinforcing the stereotypes or ideological bias of their designers and developers. Indeed, entrusting an algorithm in practice with the power to select who is worthy or not, without anyone bearing responsibility for that judgment, is to hand over the task of redefining the boundaries of human possibilities. In this process, political responsibility is also lost, not just empathy toward those excluded, which can, after all, be simulated. The exclusion of the vulnerable becomes cloaked in a veneer of neutrality and objectivity, against which it becomes difficult to raise objections. In this way, injustice goes unnoticed, and compassion, mercy, and forgiveness understood not as mere appearances, but as real political actions, gradually disappear from view. From this follows a simple but compelling consequence. We cannot consider AI to be morally neutral. In reality, every technical tool embodies choices and priorities through what it measures, ignores, and optimizes, and how it classifies people and situations. If the system is designed or used in a way that treats some lives as less worthy, or excludes them without the possibility of appeal, then it is not merely a tool to be used well, since it has already introduced criteria that contradict the inalienable dignity of the human person. For this reason, ethical discernment cannot be limited to asking whether we are using a system for good or bad purposes. It must also examine how that system is designed and what vision of the human person and society is embedded in the data and models that guide it. For AI to respect human dignity, to truly serve the common good, responsibility must be clearly defined at every stage, from those who design and develop these systems to those who use them and rely on them for concrete decisions. In many cases, however, the internal processes leading to a result remain opaque, making it harder to assign responsibility and correct errors. This is where accountability becomes crucial. The possibility of identifying who must account for decisions, justify them, monitor them, and when necessary, challenge them, and remedy any harm caused. Calling for prudence, rigorous evaluation, and at times a slower pace in adapting AI does not mean opposing progress. Instead, it is an exercise of responsible care for the human family. This need is all the more urgent, given the frequent imbalance between the speed of technological growth and the slower development of awareness, norms, safeguards, and institutions capable of governing its effects. It is not enough to invoke ethics in the abstract. Robust legal frameworks, independent oversight, informed users, and a political system that does not abdicate its responsibility are required. Otherwise, change will be governed only by technocratic thinking and presented as necessary and inevitable, ultimately imposing rules shaped by those who control data, infrastructure, and computing power. We cannot be satisfied with merely calling for the moralization of machines, the so-called alignment of AI with human values, without also having the courage to insist on a further condition, the possibility of openly discussing the ethical frameworks involved and subjecting them to shared standards of social justice. Otherwise, those who control AI will impose their own moral vision, which will become the invisible infrastructure of these systems. A more moral AI is not enough if that morality is determined by a few. What is needed is a more active political involvement that is capable of slowing things down when everything is accelerating and of protecting the opportunities for communities still to be able to participate and ask questions. In fact, as with every major technological shift, AI tends to amplify the power of those who already possess economic resources, expertise, and access to data. In light of the common good and the universal destination of goods, this raises serious concerns. Some small but highly influential groups can shape information and consumption patterns, influence democratic processes, and steer economic dynamics to their own advantage, undermining social justice and solidarity among peoples. For this reason, it is essential that the use of AI, especially when it touches on public goods and fundamental rights, be guided by clear criteria and effective oversight, grounded in participation and subsidiarity. Communities and intermediate organizations must not be reduced to passive recipients of decisions made elsewhere. They must be able to contribute to discernment and oversight. Moreover, ownership of data cannot be left solely in private hands, but must be appropriately regulated. Data is the product of many contributors and should not be treated as something to be sold off or entrusted to a select few. It is necessary to think creatively in order to manage data as a common or shared good, in a spirit of participation, as St. John Paul II already suggested regarding collective goods. Principles of social doctrine offer a framework for understanding this new reality. In a world where data, computational resources, and regulatory influence remain in the hands of a few, to speak of the common good means exposing this new form of epistemic, economic, and political asymmetry and naming the new monopolies of AI. To speak of the universal destination of goods means finding ways of ensuring universal access to both technologies and the education needed to use them. To speak of subsidiarity calls for protecting the ability of communities to make choices and corrections, rather than confining their role to mere oversight after standards have been set elsewhere. To speak of solidarity obliges us to recognize the hidden, often exploited workers who sustain algorithmic systems. To speak of justice requires questioning the global distribution of power that decides who, in fact, can train these models and who is merely subjected to them. Likewise, it means acknowledging that social justice is not only a goal to be safeguarded after technologies are deployed, but a condition that must shape their very design from the outset. Finally, I would like to employ the expression to disarm, which is close to my heart. Disarming AI means freeing it from the mentality of armed competition, which today is not limited simply to the military context, but is also an economic and cognitive phenomenon. This entails a race for ever more powerful algorithms and larger data sets, driven by the desire to secure geopolitical or commercial dominance. To disarm means discrediting the assumption that technical power automatically confers the right to govern. To disarm does not mean rejecting technology, but preventing it from dominating humanity. It means freeing technology from monopolistic control and opening it to discussion and debate, therefore making it human-friendly and restoring it to the plurality of human cultures and ways of life. Our task today is not only ethical or technical, it is ecological in the deepest sense, for it concerns the due dimension of our common home. AI is already an environment in which we are immersed, as well as a force with which we must engage. For this reason, merely regulating it is insufficient. It must be disarmed, welcoming, and accessible. I wish to address a special appeal to those who develop artificial intelligence. In one sense, technical innovation can represent human participation in the divine act of creation. Developers, therefore, bear a particular ethical and spiritual responsibility, for every design choice reflects a vision of humanity. Just as the creator of an artistic or literary work must consider the values it conveys, so developers are called to embed values in their projects with due seriousness, with transparency, responsibility toward affected communities, and careful attention to ensuring what is being called and careful attention to ensuring what is being cultivated is a genuine good.